Hey everybody, how's it going? Hopefully y'all are having a great day. In today's video, I wanted to take a bit of a trip down memory lane and discuss with you all how I landed my first job out of school, some of the things that I think are important to factor in, some things you can practice, and some good follow-up things to do after your interviews. Now, I will say the job that I first got out of college was not the job that is in the career that I ended up in. So I didn't really have much direction after college. I just knew that I had to get to work. So if that's kind of you, or you feel like you're in a similar boat, then this video will predominantly be targeted at you. Not to say that people who, have been doing internships and, have been really kind of focusing in their efforts in college to their first job. Not to say you couldn't apply some of these things, but for me, I was largely lacking direction, and hopefully this can help either whoever you are. So when I first graduated, I didn't really have any direction of where I wanted to go. So my major going in was originally economics, and then I switched over to communications and business minor. So very broad major that didn't really focus on anything, right? So I think naturally with a communications major and an athlete background, a lot of people thought, oh yeah, he should go into sales. So initially I ended up applying to a lot of sales and development roles, which I think as a career, or at least as a first-time job, is actually one of the better jobs that you can take. One, they don't really have any sort of care specifically on whether or not you have a major that applies to the job, right? It's not like I'm applying to Google for a coding job, right? Where I need to know coding. Sales and development is pretty broad stroking, right? As long as you have good communication, I think that's really all they look for. And it's a great job. Honestly, no one wants to sit on a desk and cold call all day. So not very many people are lining up at the door to get them. But that being said, it is valuable in and of itself because I think it does teach a lot of life skills. So before we get into, that job, let's talk about how I got it. So again, first thing, like I said, I went on LinkedIn primarily and just started applying to different sales and development role positions. And I got a reach back out from one of the company that ultimately I signed with. And they wanted to interview me. Now, when sending out my resume, I wanted to make sure that it was very concise and clear. Nowadays, it's very simple. You can use ChatGPT, you can, reference any number of, web articles on how to structure your resume. Honestly, just copy that. It's very simple. A good resume goes a very long way, especially for me. My sales and development role was in recruitment. So speaking as somebody who read resumes all day for over a year, a good resume is important. Don't make it too wordy. You're fresh out of college. Everybody understands that, right? Just have it laid out correctly and you're fine, right? So number one, fix up your resume. Probably only keep it to a page. If you fill it to 2 to 3 pages, most of the time people aren't reading the second and third page. They're looking at the first page and going oh wow, how does this guy have 3 pages and he's fresh out of college, right? So I got mine all the way down to 1 page and put that in. You'll see this online, but you don't have to put your address. You don't have to put, your physical address, right? Some people like when you put your GPA. I didn't end up putting my GPA because it wasn't that great, to be honest. But basically, I did everything I could on that resume to just get them to talk to me, because I know once they talk to me, I'll be able to handle it from there. So second step, I would say, after getting a good resume is know your story. Be able to tell your story perfectly. Now, if you're not very good at storytelling, I would practice, right? This is a very easy skill that you can do very little work and actually get quite far in being able to tell a very good and compelling story. Now, when you're fresh out of college, people are pretty much going to be asking you, so tell me about yourself. Tell me about your schooling experience. Tell me about your life. They're less worried about what you learned in school, because chances are 90% of what you learn in school is not going to be relevant, again, unless you're taking a STEM job, with Google or, another company where you have a hard skill that you learned. In something like a sales role, they just want to know who you are, right? And ultimately, not to spoil the secret of the trade, but as long as you're somewhat competent, they just want to find somebody that they're willing to like hang out with for 8 hours a day and make sure you're cool, right? So keep that in mind. But be able to tell your story, right? Practice in front of a mirror, be able to like engage, do hand gestures, vary your intonation, bring it down sometimes, change up the speed. Sometimes you want to be talking really fast, and other times you want to take a pause and talk a little slow, and make sure your hand gestures line up with your pauses, right? There's several different resources on YouTube that you can find. I'll link the guy down below. I'm forgetting his name right now, but he's a fantastic public speaker, and he actually talks about like different tips on how to be a better storyteller, right? So do that. Give them like a story that they can cheer for, right? Like they want to be able to cheer for you. A bit of an underdog story always helps, right? But also if you can, like I get that some people, you know, to put it bluntly, don't have an exciting life, don't have an exciting story. They haven't achieved anything. They haven't done anything. And in that case, you know, tell the best story you can and follow the other steps, and hopefully that's good enough. But for those of you who have done something, right, like you're the first in your family to go to college, you were bullied as a kid and you overcame that. You weren't particularly athletically gifted, but then you just like trained hard and like you made it, and then you went to college for it or something like that. Like there's any number of stories that you can spin in high school that then you went to college and then you overcame, or whatever the case is, right? Another thing you can do is look up the epic hero cycle online and understand the elements of an epic hero cycle, and then find ways to incorporate that about your life, right? Don't lie, don't like, oh man, I used to go to school in the snow both ways, uphill. And like, if that's not you, that's not you. Don't lie, right? But take what you have, spin it in a very compelling way, and be able to tell that story perfectly, right? Learn how to make good eye contact. Really, like being able to communicate, not just in a sales job, but in life in general, is going to be a massive asset. I recommend you practice it, right? So step 1, fix your resume up. Step 2, know your story and be able to tell it very well, and tell it with good storytelling mechanics, right? Number 3, after you're done telling your story, they're going to start asking you some questions, right? What I would recommend is repeat the question to them, right? When you repeat the question to them, you are 1, showing that you're listening, but 2, it helps you understand what the essence of their question is by saying it again. That way you don't waste any time in the interview, right? So let's say interviewer asks, okay, so, love the story. Great storytelling, by the way. Tell me of a time where, you had to deal with a particularly combative person. How did you handle the situation? And how did you ultimately create a collaborative relationship? Pause. So you just asked that, right? Collaborative relationship. Pause. If I may, so you'd be curious to know throughout, X time, what's an instance where a person and I haven't necessarily gotten along, but I was able to kind of find a solution and be able to coexist together in a mutually beneficial relationship. Am I understanding the question correctly? Right? Don't just say it verbatim, like try your best to like spin it with different language, so that if you can spin it in a different language, still capture the essence of what they're asking, and they confirm with you, yes, that is what I'm asking, or yes, perfect, right? Then you know what they're trying to get at, and you can find an answer in your head accordingly, right? Because if you recap to them and they say, yes, but I want you to focus more on this, right? You allow them to give you a free tip. They're essentially like course correcting what you would have answered to what they're looking for, right? Because a lot of times people who are interviewing candidates for jobs have a sheet of things. Like they're not just shooting from the hip, right? Like most legit companies have an interview intake form that they have a set list of questions that they're supposed to check off. Oftentimes they're checking like core competencies that they look for in new people that they hire, right? So they're checking like conflict resolution skills, communication skills, this, and that. And they're going to be rating you on a scale of 1 to 5. So that's why it's important you don't waste time and you don't misunderstand the question and completely miss the point. Because when you miss the point, you're not only demonstrating that you don't know how to like understand, communication, but you're also avoiding a thing that they're supposed to be grading you on. And then they're either going to put an A or a 3 or a 1, right? So recapping the question, very important. And then from there, take some time, just say, that's a good question. Let me think about that for a second. And let there be silence. That's hugely confidence, right? Like if you can ask for a moment of silence as you think about a question, that's very good, right? It shows comfort in the silence. It shows your ability to ask for what you need, being some time to think, and then gather your thoughts and then answer, right? Even if it's a question that you already know your answer to, right? Like if you say that to me, I know exactly the question or the answer I would give, but I would still say, that's a good question. Let me think about that for a second. Do some pump fake nods. Okay. Storytelling, right? Tell another story, right? So all of your answers are going to be stories, right? So the better you can tell the stories, the more compelling of a lasting memory that you're going to give to them, and the better score that they're going to be able to give you on the sheet, right? Because if you don't tell a good story, they're not going to remember what your answer was. And if they don't remember what your answer was, they're going to put down like 3 or a 1 or a 2, right? But if you give them really something meaty to chew on, that's a 5, that's a 4, right? Very good. So what we've covered so far, write a good resume, be able to tell your story, and be able to incorporate good storytelling elements with it. 3, rephrase the question to the interviewer after they ask. Take some pause and then answer with another story. The final step, I would say, and this is assuming that all of the steps went well, post-interview, right? Get up, shake the hand. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you for talking with me. Or if it's on the phone, thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk today. You can ask about follow-up. I don't think that's a bad idea, but me stylistically, I just say thank you. I really appreciate your time today. Have a nice day. I leave, right? Make sure you don't leave though without their email addresses, right? Email addresses are very important to get. You'll likely have the email address because the interviewer, who is like an office coordinator, probably sent you an email link for a Zoom invite, or, probably sent you, something, right? If you didn't get the interviewer's email, ask the person that scheduled the interview, right? More often than not, if you go through LinkedIn, you're probably working with a recruiter, right? Get the email of the interviewer, send them an email. I'm going to say this again, send them an email. It's important. It's very important. It's literally the thing that landed me my current job. Is one of the feedback pieces was he responded to each of the interviewers with a detailed message, like specifically for that interviewer. It wasn't just a copy paste template, right? I picked one element that each person brought up, or some story or some bonding moment, and I referenced it in the email. I wanted to make sure that the last thing that they remember was a good moment that we had between the two of us, right? Put that in an email, send it to them, right? That's very important to do, right? Shows your ability to follow up on different conversations, on different engagements, right? Because a lot of the times, especially if you're taking a sales and development role, when you finish the call with a candidate, or when you finish the call with a person that you're trying to do sales with, you have to be able to follow up. You have to be able to close, right? Some people may expect you to, they may look for you to close at the end of an interview, but I think more often than not, you can come across as a little bit, aggressive, but that's just me, right? But all that aside, follow up with an email, make it thoughtful, and send it that night. Don't send it 2 weeks from now. Don't send it 3 weeks from now. Send it that night. Send it that day if you interviewed in the morning, right? Don't hesitate to write that email, right? And then once you're done with your interview, follow up with the person that is scheduling the interviews, right? If you're working with like an in-house recruiter or a third-party recruiter, follow up with them. It is important. They're the ones that push the whole thing forward, right? They're the one that's going to go to the interviewers, get their feedback, combine it, and then push the process forward, or they're going to have a significant say in pushing the process forward, right? Reaching out to the interviewer is not going to do anything, right? So follow up with them. Just say, hey, I had a great talk with so-and-so, really loved their energy, and they asked some very good questions. And then that's the person I would probably follow up with, because the interviewer is not going to know when your next interview is. They're not going to know whether you made it or not. But the person that you follow up with that is coordinating the interview process, they will know, right? So follow up with them and just say, hey, love this person, had a great time talking, really enjoyed their conversation and their energy. Wanted to follow up and wanted to ask you when would be like expected next steps or something like that. Basically, the element of it is, when should I follow up with you if I haven't heard back, or when should I expect to hear from you about next steps? When should I expect to hear from you on, whether I'm moving forward or something like that, right? Like, try to make it a little bit less like, ride or die, let me know if I'm going to go forward or not, like, just, hey, when should I expect to hear from you? Oh, you should expect to hear from me by end of week. Perfect. If I don't hear back from you by end of week, I'll reach out to you like the following Monday or something like that, right? Give them a fail safe of like, hey, if I don't hear from you by this day, I'll follow up here. And they'll usually be like, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that. Because here's the thing. Sometimes their days get busy too, right? They're doing hundreds of other things on top of also interviewing you. They may forget. Don't let that toss your candidacy to the wayside, right? Follow up on the day that you said you were going to follow up, right? Sorry, I just shook the whole desk. But yeah, those would be the 4 things I would say. Very low hanging fruit, very easy to work on, but I would definitely recommend working on those before you start interviewing, right? And again, very good resume. If you're fresh out of college, don't make it too wordy and too lengthy, right? 1 page should suffice. Number 2, also for resumes, look up some like templates online, use ChatGPT, whatever the case is. So many tools available for you to make a good resume, but don't overthink it. Just make it 1 page, make it look good, send it. Step 2, when interviewing, know your story and be able to tell it well, right? Incorporate elements of storytelling. I would say, again, look up the Epic Hero Cycle, see if you can apply and mold your story to fit the Epic Hero Cycle, right? And then be able to tell a compelling story in person, right? Be able to maintain good eye contact, be able to do some hand gestures, some head movements, vary your intonation, vary your tempo. These are all very easy things for you to practice at home in front of a mirror, but are going to pay a lot of dividends later on, right? Number 3, when asked a question, rephrase the question to them, not using their words, right? Get their buy-in that is what they are asking you. Pause, tell another story, right? Again, this is where storytelling comes in very, very handy, right? But we want to recap the question to them, because if we don't, we might spend 5 minutes answering a question that doesn't answer what they're trying to get on their core competency sheet when interviewing candidates, right? So you want to make sure you re-ask the question so that they can correct you and say, oh, actually, I'm looking for this. And then you can say, oh, understood. So blank. And then when they say yes, pause, story, right? Number 4, after the interview, say thank you, leave, follow up with an email to the interviewer, right? Thanking them for their time, appreciating them for part of a conversation, right? Like you can insert whatever element you shared in common, you both were from the same town, you both like this coffee, whatever the case is, right? Follow up with like one little like memory with them, right? And that's it. Don't ask them when your next interview is, they don't know. After you've sent them that after you sent the interviewer the email, send your coordinator an email as well, right? This could be an internal recruiter, it could be an external recruiter, right? But send them an email, say, hey, I just finished the interview, really enjoyed talking with insert person's name. We bonded over X, right? Let me know when I should hear back from you, right? They give you a time, say perfect. If I don't hear from you by then, I will follow up the next X day, right? I'll follow up with you at the beginning of the next week or something, right? It allows for them to get busy and forget you, but still have that fail safe that you're not going to be thrown to the wayside, right? And it also shows initiative that, hey, look, I'm taking this into my own hands, and if I don't hear from you, I will follow up. So it shows good follow-up. It shows good initiative, right? Now, stop the video there. You could probably just click off the video. You're fine. But I want to also take like 2 minutes to talk about why I really liked having a sales role for my first job. So being in a job where I had a cold call all day was intense, right? Like you have to learn how to be able to talk on the fly. You have to be able to call people that don't want to talk to you, right? Like no one wants to talk to a recruiter. No one wants to talk to like a salesperson, right? But you get very good at captivating attention. You get very good at being able to get your foot in the door, start a conversation and keep it going, right? hundreds of resources online on YouTube about how to, capture somebody's attention. Robert Greene is fantastic for this, right? He talks about the art of seduction, right? And it's not just like, it doesn't have to be sexual seduction. It could just be like verbal seduction, right? When you genuinely take time to listen to somebody else, try to get to know them. That's an odd thing. Not many people do that. People nowadays, they just talk at each other, right? So when you talk to somebody and they don't talk at you, but instead they listen to you, and you can kind of like follow them along. Like you keep talking, they keep listening. It's very enticing. It's very like, it's novel, right? So you can learn how to do all that kind of stuff in the job, which I think is fantastic, right? And it also teaches you, I think, at least for me when recruiting, it had a really applicable skill of being able to represent myself very well when interviewing for jobs, right? Because everyone's going to interview for jobs. And if you take a job where your job is to interview other people, you can get kind of good and you kind of understand what the interviewer is looking for. And then you can then in turn use that knowledge and become better at interviewing, right? So that was important. I didn't really enjoy working for a sales commission. I made good money, but it wasn't consistent, right? Like some months it would be like 2 to 3x my base pay. Other months it would just be base pay, right? And that's good. I was able to like, ration out the money accordingly, but long term it didn't really like sit well because I couldn't plan like throughout an extended period of time with like a level of certainty that I wish I would have had, right? So from there, I ended up using the experience that I had to then apply for a job in the finance field. And once you have that work experience, honestly, if you can't tell a good story from having a sales job, like, sales development role, recruiter for a third party, if you don't have good stories and you don't have good work experience from there, like that's kind of on you, like there's just a wealth of knowledge that you can accrue from recruiting, right? From a sales role. There's so many stories you can be able to tell, funny ones, compelling ones, victories, defeats, whatever. Like it's just storytelling heaven, right? So you should be able to do it. But anyways, hopefully you find this helpful. Hopefully this allows you to, do a great job on your next interview. If it does, feel free to let me know. I would love to hear some success stories in the comment section, or if you have any questions, feel free to ask. But without anything else to say, hope you all have a wonderful day. See ya.